In episode 2, the aftermath of the prince getting beheaded hits the entire castle, but as you can imagine, it hits his parents the hardest. Helena dealing with the fact that she was there, she was held at knife point, and she was forced to point out which one of her children would die. Aegon, meanwhile, responds in a blind rage, vowing to bring down the person who did this, who he's convinced is Rhaenyra. Now, when he convenes with his council, Otto Hightower isn't so sure. He just doesn't believe that Rhaenyra would be capable of killing a child. But to Aegon and to many others, they're convinced there's only one person who could do this, who would have reason to do this, and that's Rhaenyra. Aegon wants to go after Rhaenyra right then and there and start this war, but Otto says no. But because he doesn't believe that it was Rhaenyra, but also because he thinks that he can use this tragedy to actually gain some supporters. What Otto says they should do is take the little prince's body through the town and let the entire kingdom see what, quote, Rhaenyra Targaryen did to him. It's complete propaganda, and even though Otto doesn't believe that she did do it, he thinks that using it to their advantage is just the smartest move at this point. It could pay dividends in the long run by gaining the support of everybody. Once they see what big bad Rhaenyra did to this little 4-year-old, how could they support her? There is pushback on this, though. Alicent doesn't want to do it, and Helena certainly doesn't want to do it. But they're convinced to do so anyway, whereas Aegon, he's not going to have to show his face because it's too difficult for him. Once again, the Otto Hightower propaganda machine is in full swing. And if you're wondering where the head is, well, they did end up getting it back. The rat catcher got away, but the muscle, the guy who actually cut the head off, he was caught. Lord Larys had his men take him to the dungeons where they can question him and find out exactly who was behind all of this. And the next day, while Alicent and Helena are seen throughout the kingdom, riding on a wagon behind this little boy's body, questioning the murderer is exactly what Lord Larys is doing. And the murderer gives up the information pretty quickly. That Daemon was the one who paid them off, 50 now, 50 later, and he did it with a rat catcher, although he doesn't remember who the rat catcher is. Once Lord Larys has all this information, he lets the king come in and finish this guy off. There's a moment where Aegon and Helena are passing each other, one coming from the funeral service, the other coming from making the killer pay, and they just kind of give each other a look, both dealing with grief in a very different way. But they aren't the only ones who are dealing with grief and guilt. Pretty much everybody is that was in a high position. Like Sir Criston Cole is sitting there saying, if I wasn't breaking my vows and having sex with the queen, maybe I could have saved this little boy. And the queen is saying kind of the same thing. Well, if I wasn't having sex with Sir Criston Cole, maybe that little boy would be alive. And then there's Aemon, who knows exactly who the hit was actually intended for, but he was nowhere to be found. So he certainly feels guilty, and he goes and wallows away in a brothel to a hooker about how he actually does feel guilty of what happened with Luke, but how this is further proof that Daemon is just scared of him. Yeah, everybody in the kingdom is kind of asking themselves what they could have done to prevent this tragedy. The next day, Criston Cole actually takes out most of his aggression on poor Eric. He starts off by questioning where Eric was when the prince was killed, and Eric says, I was guarding Aemon. He wanted to hang out with some friends. But Criston Cole continues to go in on Eric, blaming him for not being there, pointing out that his brother is a traitor. And when Eric pushes back, Criston Cole reminds him who's actually in charge of this by saying, well, you know, I have a way you can redeem yourself. Go kill Rhaenyra. The pressure of being the head of the King's Guard is clearly getting to Criston Cole. He's been in charge for 5 days, and this tragedy has occurred on his watch. On top of it, he's broken some vows. So, unfortunately, the whipping boy in this situation is going to be Eric, and he can't do anything about it. He knows that going off and trying to, quote, kill Rhaenyra is going to be a fool's errand, and he's probably going to die doing so, but he doesn't really have much of a choice. And the way that Criston Cole is wording it shouldn't be that difficult. You got a twin brother over there. Just pretend to be him. Sneak in. Kill the queen. You'll come back. You'll save a lot of lives because this war won't kick off, and you'll be deemed a hero. And while all of that sounds well and good, Eric knows that it's going to be a lot more difficult than that. But he heads off. While Criston Cole takes action, so does Aegon. When he finds out about this rat catcher fiasco, he hangs the rat catcher. The problem is, he hangs all of the rat catchers. And he does so publicly, their bodies hanging for their families to see. You've got 5 innocent men who were killed and only one guilty one, and that's something that Otto Hightower does not stand for. He barges into a room that's occupied by Aegon and Criston Cole, and he starts reaming into the king about how this was the dumbest move possible. How he just took all that good favor, and he looks like a tyrant. He keeps going in and in and in on the king until finally the king gets tired of it and says, you know what? You made me look weak by having that little funeral procession. You haven't been a man of action. You know who has? Sir Criston Cole. He's already done something. And when he finds out that Criston Cole sent Eric to go kill Rhaenyra, he can't believe the stupidity. But for Aegon, he loves it. He loves the gumption, if you will. And he decides that what Lord Larys said was correct. That Otto Hightower was his father's hand, but he doesn't need to be his hand. And he fires Otto Hightower. But he doesn't promote Lord Larys. Instead, he promotes Sir Criston Cole, who's had the fastest rise you've ever heard of, and now finds himself as the hand to the king. As for Otto, he's embarrassed. He just got fired, he's not on the king's council, and he knows that he can't stay, so he has to go somewhere. He goes to talk to Alicent about it, and he's planning on heading back to Old Town and counseling Darren. But Alicent says, don't do that. Instead, go to Highgarden, talk to the Tyrells, get their support, and in the meantime, I'll talk to my son, and I'll get him back on board with you being hand to the king. Right now, he's emotional. He just lost his son. He's not thinking clearly. When she's done talking to her father, she goes to talk to her son and find out what the hell he just did. But when she walks in on him, he's crying. He's finally mourning the loss of his son. And when she sees this, she can't bring herself to do anything but just walk out the door and walk back to her room, where Sir Criston Cole is waiting. And all that pent-up aggression, she takes out on him. She starts slapping him, but this is just a lot of sexual tension, and the two end up once again hooking up. Because even though every time they say, oh, we can't do this again, they can't resist each other. It's adorable. Now, as for Rhaenyra, when she finds out what happened in Jaehaerys, she is mortified. I mean, she's completely disgusted and can't believe anybody would do such a thing. She, of all people, knows what it feels like to lose a child, but to this, in this manner, she can't even believe it. And she's also disgusted when she finds out that she's being blamed for it, because she can't believe that anyone would think she was capable of doing such a thing. She, of course, wants to put out a statement denying that she had anything to do with it, but her counsel lets her know that it's probably going to fall on deaf ears. They also know that politically, this is horrible for them because they're going to lose a lot of people that were loyal to them just because of the fact that Otto Hightower's propaganda machine is working. Finally, though, she looks over at Daemon, who always has something to say, and realizes that he hasn't said anything on the matter. And that's when it dawns on her that he had something to do with it. She has a private conversation with him where he admits that, yes, he did have something to do with it, but he takes no responsibility for it because he told those people to go after Aemond. And when she grills him on what did you tell them to do if they couldn't find Aemond, he doesn't really have an answer for it. He just continues to pass the buck and take no responsibility for what happened. He just looks at it like it was an unfortunate situation. This kicks off a giant fight between the two. Rhaenyra feeling like Daemon will just do anything he feels like, and part of the reason why is because deep down he still resents her for the fact that she got what he felt like he deserved, the heir to the throne. She flat out tells him, my father couldn't trust you, and honestly, I don't know if I can trust you. To which he screams back, I'm headed to Harrenhal to raise an army behind you. These two get absolutely nowhere on this argument, neither one giving an inch, and the next day when Daemon heads off, Rhaenyra isn't even sure he's headed to Harrenhal. Rhaenyra does get support from Daemon, kind of. It's in the form of his daughter, Baela. Rhaenyra tells Baela to take Moondancer and just keep an eye on King's Landing. She needs to know what their next move is because she figures with them thinking that she was the one who ordered the hit, they're going to come looking for some revenge. She has no idea that the revenge is already on the way. After instructing Baela, Rhaenyra also wants to get the lowdown on exactly how this hit transpired, and she knows that one person she can talk to is Mysaria. With Mysaria in custody, Rhaenyra questions her on what she had to do with this, And she eventually says, I gave Daemon 2 names, but you have to understand, the only reason I did that was because he promised me my freedom. For Rhaenyra, she's not about to honor that. It doesn't really benefit her to free Mysaria. While she doesn't really like Mysaria, she also knows that Mysaria does have some inside information. But then she actually recognizes Mysaria as the woman who Daemon promised years ago that he would marry, and then later took back that offer. Mysaria actually tells a tale about how she worked her way up from nothing, trying to gain respect, eventually gaining a home that she could be proud of, until eventually it was all taken away from her. She assumes by Otto Hightower, but the point is, no matter what she does, some people are always going to view her as a whore. And for Rhaenyra, who just had that argument with Daemon, man, that really, really hits home with her. So after some thought, she decides, you know what, I am going to let Mysaria leave. She tells Eric to take care of it, and a little while later, Mysaria is making her way down to the port to take off. But as she's doing so, she notices that Sir Eric is walking away from the port. And considering she knows that they're twins, she knows something's up. She alerts the guard, and it's unknown whether the guard was able to get word to the kingdom or not, but by the time that Eric is able to get into Rhaenyra's chambers, he's not able to kill her, because he's caught by his brother. This kicks off a big fight between the two, where eventually they both die. Initially, Rhaenyra's Eric winning out, but then he just feels so guilty about everything, he falls on the sword and kills himself. Either way, the fact that somebody sent a hit on Rhaenyra, that's guaranteed to start a war.
Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.